All right, hello everyone. So you should be seeing my screen now. What we're going to be going over today, like Sarah said, is the basics of report edits. So we've got an advanced version of this already out there on our knowledge base if you guys are interested in that. But today we're going to be kind of sticking to the basics. I'm going to show you how to get to the report editor, some of the more simple changes that you can make, as well as starting to kind of look at what it looks like to get into the more advanced stuff. And giving you some resources on that as well. So let's go ahead and jump in here. All right, so first of all, how do we get to the report editor in SigmaNEST? So SigmaNEST comes with, I think about 60 now it is, default reports. And those are in FR3 format. We've got a fast report editor that's available in SigmaNEST. It comes installed with every version. You don't need to be on a specific level of SigmaNEST to get to this. You can get to it in Techno or PowerPack, either one. And what you're going to see is on your nesting detail tab, after you've nested and NC'd and posted your program and all that sort of thing, where you jump over here to click on the report button. You can print your reports from here, but this is also where we're going to go to get to the editor as well. So once you're in that task report printing, there's a lot in this box that you may not know kind of what it does or what it corresponds to. Let me go ahead and kind of run through what all these are. So a lot of people get the text printer and the graphics printer a little bit mixed up. 95% of you are going to be using the text printer, not the graphics printer. So the text printer is actually printing whatever report you select down here at the bottom. The graphics printing is for doing things like printing out just the graphic of what you're seeing in SigmaNEST. It can do some scaling and things like that as well. We don't see that used super often. Like I said, most of the time you're going to be printing a pre-configured report, not just a view of the graphics. So for the most part, you can actually just leave this graphics checkbox off, and you don't need to worry about the print options there for the graphics section. And then the text printer, which is right now set to Microsoft XPS Document Writer, that's just the default. That's where you're going to set whatever printer you want that report to go to. So you can set there, most computers come installed with some sort of a print to PDF function if that's what you're going for. Now, if you are going for PDF printing, I recommend you look into our e-report options that can automatically send that report to a PDF and save it somewhere, or multiple reports from a nest. But within the window here, we're going to set the text printer for what we want. We've got our print selection down near the bottom that's going to show us all of the reports we have currently loaded and available, and then the ones with the checkbox on are the ones that we're actually going to print or preview when we hit a print or preview from this box. And then finally, the sheet selection over on the right can be very important. Whether you want to print all the sheets in your task, all the different layouts, or whether you just want to select what sheets, or just do the current sheet if you're only looking to see the layout that you're viewing at the time. Okay, and then these buttons down at the bottom are how we're going to get into either continuing on to print a report or getting into the setup and kind of the editing of reports. So setup does exactly what it sounds like. It's going to get us into that setup where we can actually edit the reports. So to kind of review, you go into your print box and then you click the setup button here to get to the editing section that we're going to look at in more detail today. Okay, so within that setup window, once you click that button, we've got a couple of different options here. First of all, this is going to show you a list of all the reports that you currently have loaded in SigmaNEST. This is not necessarily every report you have available. We have a default list of a couple dozen that are loaded up. If you want to peruse what else might be available, you can click the Add button. That's going to take you straight to your report folder that you're pathed to in SigmaNEST. That's usually a subfolder of the SM data out on a network. And you can peruse in there what other FR3 reports might be available by default. There's a couple good ones like this detail analysis report for costing. There's some part labeling reports, some of which have barcodes on them and things like that. Most of those are loaded by default, but feel free to browse as well. Now, if you wanted to edit a report or create a new report, what you're going to do here is go ahead and click Clone, usually. So if I click Clone while I have a certain report highlighted, it's actually just going to create a copy of that report. And that's always best practice when you're editing a report, because we want to preserve what the state was originally in case you make a change that you have a hard time undoing and you need to go back. It's always a good idea to have a backup of the original report and not modify the original. So when we start to get into an example later on, I'll show you a demo of doing that cloning process. It's really simple. You basically just hit the button, and then we're going to select the clone for editing. So speaking of that, let's go ahead and take a look at the Fast Reports editor. So once you go into a report for editing, this editor is going to pop up, and it looks really complicated at first, but really you've just got your main report view, and then you've got some properties and some information on either side in those columns. So the main area here is going to show you the layout of the report. You can see it kind of has box definitions and things like that around the different sections or the different text boxes or areas of the report. It's got some data bands, it's got a header and a footer, that kind of thing. The next thing you're going to see over on the left here is a properties tree. So whatever thing you have selected out on the report, you're going to see the properties for that box or that picture or that logo over on the left here. The second column on the left here is just a tree view of every item that's on that report. So we can see we've got a picture, which is the SigmaNEST logo. We've got some memo fields that are just text fields. We've got other fields that are linked to certain information in SigmaNEST. And clicking on any one of those in the tree view is also another way to view the properties for that. And it's going to highlight it out on the main sheet that we're viewing as well. And then finally, over here on the far right, we've got another tree view that's showing the data that's available to be added to this nest. So right now, we've got two data bands on the nest, or on the report we're viewing right here. We have a master data band set to the task and a detailed data set to the nest. So on the right here, we're actually seeing the nest and the task data information and all the fields that are available to be added or removed from the report there. So, and we'll go into how to do that in a minute here. And then the final buttons I want to highlight are up at the top here. So we've got options up here for saving the report as you go and for previewing it. And we'll use those as well today to kind of show some examples. So let's go ahead and jump into SigmaNEST then, and I'll show you a basic example of changing text fields. So I'm going to open up SigmaNEST. You can see I've already got a task here. It's got a machine background that's showing, and it's already NC'd and ready to go. So we're going to jump over to nesting detail and into the report button. This is going to open up kind of just our generalized task report, and we're going to click on print. So we're in the task report printing box. From here, we could go ahead and print or preview a report, but what we're going to do is jump into the setup here. And here's where we can go ahead and start some of our editing. So I'm going to take this task layout summary report, and the first thing I'm going to do is clone it so that I'm preserving the original report and I'm editing a copy. So I've cloned it, and you can see that it showed up down here as task layout summary 1. I can see that it's linked to task layout sum 1 FR3. I'm going to click on that and make sure it's highlighted so that that is the report that I'm going to choose to edit. So whatever report is highlighted in this list is the one it's going to perform the action on when you hit the button. So we'll go ahead and click edit to open that up here. Okay, so this opens up our fast report page here. I can double check and verify that I am on that copy by looking up at the top. So it's task layout sum _ 1.fr3. That confirms for me that I am editing the copy that I made and not the original report. Okay, so from here, let's take a look at some of the kind of text things that we can do here. First, I'm going to preview this report just so we see what it looks like outside of the editor at the start here. So we can see we've got kind of a preview of the image of the nest. We've got some basic information about the task, or about the sheet mostly, some scrap information, number of layouts, that kind of thing. This task only has one layout in it, so we only see this in one section. If it had multiple layouts, we'd see this repeated throughout the report. Now, one thing I'm noticing here is when we close this, our data fields for sheet name and the actual data sheet name, the label and the data are overlapping a little bit. So if I got a longer sheet name in here, say I'm using very, very long sheet names, I might get some overlap in there. I might want to change that a bit. So I'm going to click on this Nest sheet name data field. I can see here, it looks like if I start to move it around, I can see where it's going to kind of tell me if it's aligned with other fields. So I do want it to stay aligned with my other field columns. I'm going to keep it aligned with the sheet name column. Now I notice over here on the right here that it is kind of a shortened or truncated field, and maybe I need a little bit more room on that. So I can go ahead and expand this out, maybe keep it in line with some of the material fields so that I have a little bit more room to display that text. Let's say sometimes it was cut off and I want to make sure it fully displays. The other thing I can do is take a look at the sheet name field. I can see that it's overlapping a little bit to the right. This is a little nitpicky, but I'm going to go ahead and bring that back so that I'm sure it's not going to overlap. Maybe I also on my shop floor, we don't really use the terminology sheet name. We use the term stock name. So I want to change this to kind of match the terminology that we're using. So in that case, I've got the field highlighted. I'm going to double click on it. And this is just a text box that's labeling the actual data. So I can see the memo field comes up. It says sheet name. All I need to do here is to change that to stock name. And now the actual display that I see on the report is going to match our nomenclature out on the shop floor. The other thing I can do here is I can start to do some color changes or some highlighting or bolding or things like that. So let's say that up here in total number of sheets, I want to really highlight that this only has one layout, or if it has multiples, how many that is. So I might go ahead and click on this. Now when I click on this, we see the properties of this over here. Watch if I click somewhere else, we see different properties over on the left. So I do want to make sure I'm highlighting the correct field when I make these edits. And I'm going to make this total number of sheets field, I'm going to make it a red color, just so it's very, very bold on the report and catches the operator's eye. Ooh, I changed the background color instead. Let me revert that here. There we go, back to none. Okay, so I'm still highlighting on that field. I'm actually going to come down here to the font section and hit the little plus section next to that. And then the font color here is where I'm going to change the font color to red. There's a nice red right there. You can see it changes it here on the report. And I'm going to go ahead and preview this report to kind of see the changes I've made so far. And if we look at this, now that number of layouts is in red, a little bit more noticeable on the report, but I want to go a little bit further with it and do some more highlighting to make sure that my operators really see that number and don't misread it. So the other thing I'm going to do here is let's go ahead and make this bold as well. So again, I'm going to click on the field, drop down the font section, and we're going to jump down to, let's look at the style here. So FS bold is currently set to false. I'm just going to hit that drop down, change it to true so that that is also bolded text. And then let's make it a little bigger too. Let's make this a font size of 12 instead of 10. All right, so now we should really be seeing a noticeable difference here. There we go. So we can see we've got the big number 1 there. And if I had another sheet with multiple, say it was to be cut multiple times, then that would really highlight for my operators how many times that layout is to be cut in a repeat. Okay, so that's some really basic changes that can be made. When I'm done with my changes, I'm going to go ahead and save my report. So I have a save button up here. Like I said, I can preview it as I go to make sure that the changes that I want are happening. Now, there are times there's some data things happening in the back. The data doesn't actually refresh when you preview straight from fast reports here. So you may, depending on if you're adding fields and things like that, you may need to go back to, you may need to save your report here, go back to SigmaNEST and back in to preview. But you should see most of your changes update when you preview straight from fast reports here. Okay, so if I'm happy with that, I'm going to go ahead and close that. I've got my report right there in my list. And I'll go ahead and close out of this, and we'll jump back over to some more information about different things you can change. Pull that over. Okay, so we took a look at changing some text fields. The next thing we're going to take a look at is adding a custom logo. So let me open up Fast Reports again. So I'm back in the same report here, back in the report editor. Let's say that we want to change out this logo for something more updated. So I'm going to click up here. Now notice, upon first click, I can look at my little highlight boxes and see that this is actually selecting kind of this whole header. It's not selecting my logo in particular. So there's a couple things I can do from here. First, this is a pretty simple report. The logo is almost always towards the top of the tree over here. So I can easily come over here and see, okay, picture 1, that's the only picture in the report, that's my logo. So I can click on that and I can see that it highlights the logo. The other thing I could do, say it was a more complicated report, I was having trouble figuring out which thing in the tree was the one I was trying to highlight, I can just send to back. So I'm going to right click on the task layout summary. I'm going to choose to send it to the back. And that basically just puts it behind the logo so that when I click over here, it highlights the logo instead of that whole header section. So however you do it, get to where you have just the logo highlighted here, and then we're going to edit it. You can double click or you can right click and choose edit to get to the edit window. Now, what I recommend here is not deleting and re-adding or anything like that. We're just going to replace the picture. There's some properties on these that have to do with scaling and where it is on the report and things like that. It's a whole lot easier to just replace the image than it is to totally delete it and add a new image in. So to do that, we've got this picture screen that came up when we chose edit. I'm going to choose the load folder option. And this is just going to bring up a file explorer. I'm going to choose the logo that I want to load in. I'll choose open, and then I'll hit my checkbox. It looks like my window's glitched out a little bit there, but here it is. Okay, so we can see that logo has been replaced with the new one that I selected. The scaling and the positioning and everything is all intact. I don't need to touch anything in regards to that. And let's go ahead and preview, and we'll see the new report here. There we go, new logo and everything, looks great. So all I need to do from here is save this and start using this report. I'm going to go ahead and not save it, go back here. All right, so the next thing we're going to take a look at is the data tree. So we talked about at the beginning how each of those data bands, we had task and part in the report we were reviewing, and there was a lot of different data that could be added to the report. So let's jump over back into SigmaNEST and back into the report editor, and we're going to show a demo of editing and adding fields. So I'm back in my setup screen. For this one, I'm going to mess with the layout detail report. This is one that we often see requests for adding or removing or editing different fields. So again, I'm going to clone this report so that I'm not editing the original report. It's going to create a copy of it. And I think it's actually going to open it for editing when I click clone. So let's give it just a second here to finish copying that. There we go. So we've got layout detail 1 down at the bottom, and we've got our report editor open for the layout detail report. And again, I can verify up in the top left that I am on my copy of that report. Okay, so here's the data tree I was talking about. This layout detail report has quite a few data bands, so there's quite a bit of data over on the right-hand side here. Any of these fields, as long as you stay within the data band that it is associated with. So for example, if I'm grabbing from Nest, I want to put that information in the Nest section. If I'm grabbing from Torch, I'll put it in this section, etc. As long as I stay within those fields, I can grab anything over here and bring it into my report here. Now this report's pretty full as it is, but there's definitely opportunities to add and manipulate. So let's preview this just so I can show you what we're going to be looking at. And we're going to kind of focus on the part section down at the bottom here. So in my case, I'm not really using drawing or revision number. That's just not something I'm tracking on my parts. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those fields and then take a look and see if there's other information I would rather display there. So let's close that. I can see down here I've got my drawing number and my revision number field. Let's go ahead and just get rid of drawing number. So I'm going to select that field. Now that's just the header, the title for that column. The actual data is output by this field down below. So let me double click on that and kind of show you guys what this looks like. So this is pulling, I can see from the nest part data section, and it's field drawing no, or drawing number. And I can see that over here. So let's take a look at, there's the nest part data section, and it's pulling field drawing no. So that field right there is what is being pulled there. Now, I don't necessarily want to see that, so I'm just going to get rid of it. I do have an issue where some of my part names are longer than will fit in this column over here. So I'm actually going to expand that column with the room I just created. And to do that, the easiest way is to move all of this at once. So I'm going to click one field, hold down my control button, and start clicking the other fields here. Oh, come on now. Oh, and of course it doesn't want to work while I'm demoing it live. Okay, let's just move these over here. Okay, so we're going to move these over. You can see the blue highlights telling us we're keeping them in line with everything else. So I want to kind of adjust a little bit, making sure I keep stuff in line. All right, that's looking great. Move over our headers for those. And if I were doing this, I might be a little bit more nitpicky about how my columns lined up as well. Yeah, there we go. See where I've got the vertical blue lines as well to make sure that my columns are lined up. All right, we'll move over this last quantity field here. All right, and then the other thing we want to do is we want to expand this nest part field. So that's just going to allow it to display more text if I have longer part names. Let's put it out to about here, and then I'm going to move the header over a little bit so it's a little more centered rather than all the way to the left of that field. All right, so we've got all that moved over. Let's preview our report, make sure it still looks like what we want. Yep, so we got rid of drawing number, we've got revision number. I might want to space out these columns a little bit, and that weight kind of runs right into revision number. But overall, this is looking good. I've got plenty of room for my part names now. So let's take a look at adding another field. So let's look at this nest part data set here. Nest part data set. Now what we're doing is we're actually using one of these part data fields to determine routing for the parts, like whether it goes to paint or to bending or to assembly next. So I want to display that in the part information down here for the operator. So we're using part data 1 in SigmaNEST for that information. So I'm going to actually go ahead and put this field into my report. So I'm just going to click it here and drag it onto the report. So I want to put it down here with all my part information. And I'm going to get it all lined up. And it looks like this is a rather large field at the moment. So let's definitely shorten that up here. There we go. And it also looks like the font on this is a little bit bigger than the other fields that are down here. So let's take a look at that. So this font is currently set to 10, and I'll bet these are 8 or something along those lines. So my other fields here, let me make sure I have one highlighted. Font is 8. So let's change the font on this as well so that it's in line with the other fields that we've got there. Switch that to 8. And then the other thing I want to do here, and make sure that this isn't overlapping. The other thing I want to do here is I need to add a label for this. So I need to add a label up here for this bit of information. What I'm going to do here is actually just copy and paste one of the current labels so that I keep all my formatting in it. And I can use Control-C, Control-V to create a copy, or I can right-click on a field, copy it, and then right-click in a blank area and paste it. All right, so there it is there. Let's make sure it's lined up with everything else. And then we'll double click on it to go ahead and change the name on it. So I want this to be my routing information. There we go. Okay, so that's all there. I can preview my report and make sure it's showing what I want. Now this is a case where I may need to make sure that my parts actually have the part data 1 populated. It looks like we're not getting any information there right now. So I'd go back to SigmaNEST to make sure the info was there, and then I should see that all populate on my report here. All right, so that's adding and removing fields. If you have anything on any of your default reports that's maybe just it's too cluttered for you, it's some fields you're not using, you'd rather open up the spacing a little bit, you can come right in here, delete the fields you don't want, maybe add a couple that are more useful for you, like we saw before. Change your fonts, maybe do some color in there if you've got a color printer or you're sending out PDFs, so that some fields are really highlighted for what you want to see. Okay, so we're all done with that one. We'll go ahead and save and close it, and I'll go ahead and get out of here so we can take a look at what's next. Okay, so we showed editing and adding fields. The next thing we're going to take a look at is changes that you can make to that image on reports like that layout detail. So let's jump back into that, and we'll actually jump into the one that we edited here and take a look at it. So this picture right here is showing a layout detail that has part IDs on it. So the idea here is that each one of those numbers is going to correspond to the number listed at the bottom of the report. So actually, let me grab the right one here. So in this case, you know, with these smaller reports embedded in a larger, or smaller parts embedded in a larger part, the numbers can get a little bit jumbled in that case because it's hard to get the placement exactly right. But on nests with larger parts or solid parts like we're seeing over on the right-hand side of this nest, it can be really useful to see what's what. And this can especially be useful if you have like right-hand and left-hand parts or something like that, where it's difficult sometimes, or they get mixed up sometimes as they're getting offloaded. So let's take a look at changes that can be made to this area right here. So this is where that preview of the nest is going to show when we print the report. There's a couple different things we can do here. Let's look at those nest IDs first. So I've highlighted that. I can see by my little highlighting boxes that that's the field I'm on. And now when I come over here to the left, I can see I have an ID number mode property. Right now it's set to sequence IDs. What I'm going to do is change this to nest IDs so that it shows those numbers that we wanted to see. So let's take a look and preview this. Okay, so this is the preview that we have of the nest IDs, and you can't really see the numbers on this. But if we zoom way in, you'll actually notice that we do have numbers. They're just really tiny. See those little dots on each part are actually those nest IDs that we want to see. So they're there, we just need to increase the font on them. So let's close that. Again, we're highlighted on here, and let's increase that font. So we're going to jump over to the font side. Let's just make it plenty big enough that we can see it. And let's preview that again. And there we go. So we've got all of our numbers on there. Like I said, when you've got a nest with a bunch of small parts or parts inside parts, it still makes it a little bit difficult to decipher, but on some nests it can be really helpful to distinguish different parts. And those are going to correspond, like I said, to the part ID down here. So part 3, we look down here, part 3 is this part information. Okay, so some other things we can do with this section right here. If you noticed in SigmaNEST, when I was showing my nest, I actually had a machine background there. So let me show you a couple of things here. So we can click on the nest section here, the nest preview section, and I'm going to turn on display detail on this, and we're going to preview it. And actually, let me go ahead and detail that in SigmaNEST. So let me jump over there. Okay, so in SigmaNEST, you guys might have used the detail buttons. So if we go ahead and detail this, we're going to see the title block added here. This is kind of an older form of reports. It does add some part IDs as well. Other forms of detailing can be things like part IDs that are added in the text of a part. So if I take a look at part parameters and I add an auto text that is detail only, but not actually marking on the part. We'll jump over here to grain. We'll add an auto text. Let's just do the part name with a decent size. And instead of marking, we're actually going to make it a no cut. So that's considered a detail as well. So any of that information, like auto text that is added like that, the detail that is added in SigmaNEST, any of that can be displayed by turning on display detail here. The other thing we can do here is display dimensions. So if you have some dimensions on your sheet or on some parts that you want to show, this is really useful for some part level reports where you might want to print a report of just a single part and show the dimensions on it. And then the third thing we have on here is display NC. So right now this is set to true. So if we preview this report, I'll actually be seeing the rapid moves and the different NC on this report. So you can see kind of the light dotted lines. And we can toggle that on or off as well right here. Okay, so that is part IDs and kind of the NC path, whether or not you want to show that in the detail layer. So let's take a look at now the one more kind of iteration into what you can do here is some basic functions in math. So your syntax is going to change a little bit. You can use some math equations and different functions on the fields in a report. So let's jump into one and I'll kind of show you here what I mean by that. We're going to jump back over to the task layout summary and kind of deal with a bit of a simpler report when we're looking at these math functions. Okay, so when we're looking at our data tree over on the right, each of these little symbols here is going to kind of tell you what type of data that is going to add for you. So the A just means it's a font or a string. You can't do any functions or math on that. All you can do is change fonts or change boldness or things like that. But when you see something like the number here, that means that field could have math done on it. So I might want to do something like multiply max x by max y to get an area, or there may be other functions that I want to do concerning quantities or concerning stack height or things like that. Now for a lot of that, we have other default fields. For example, there is a sheet area field, so I wouldn't really need to multiply x, y. I can just use the field for sheet area. But if there is a time when you find that it would be useful to do some math on one of these fields to get the number that you're actually looking for, that can definitely be done in here. So let's take, for example, some unit conversions, because that's a pretty common one. So let's just look at the sheet size here. So if we take a look at the field that's being used here, I'm going to open this up. So this already has some functions applied to it. So it's showing the plate length, and then this string right here is just formatting that to 2 decimal places. And then the text X, so length by width, by the plate height, and again formatting it to 2 decimal places. Now let's say that we also wanted to display the area of the sheet. So let's change this field right here. Instead of sheet name, let's add the area. So here we go, scroll down here. Here we go, sheet area. And then I'll change my title as well. So say sheet area. Okay, and let's preview that and take a look at what we've got. So now we have the sheet area, but this is in, let's see, 7200. So this is going to actually be in a unit that I don't necessarily want. So let's take a look here at what kind of changes we can make to that to get what I want out of it. Yeah, so that's going to be in square inches right now. Let's say that I wanted square feet, so I need to divide that by 144. What we're going to do here is go ahead and jump into the sheet area. Now, the formatting for this is just the square brackets around it, but when I need to do some math to it, I need to add some extra syntax here. So I'm going to add some carets within the brackets, to designate the nest sheet area. And then I'm just going to divide that by 144. And that should give me the square, or the sheet area in square feet instead of in square inches. So we've got that in there. We'll go ahead and preview it. And now we can see that this is 50 square feet of sheet area instead of the 7,200 in square inches. So right there, I've got that. Now that's still not telling me what units I'm in. So maybe I want to add some text to that as well. So let's jump back in there. I've got my math done there, and then maybe I'll add square feet as just a text display within that. We'll preview this again. And we can see now it's telling me, okay, this is 50 square feet of sheet area. And I can do that too with different fields. So if I wanted to multiply two fields by each other, I can just add that in here. I would want to add the text for the other field and just add that multiplier, and just make sure that each of my fields that I'm using are within carets, and then that any text that I want to display is outside the square brackets. Okay, so that's some really basic math. If you ever have questions about this, feel free to give us a call. We can give you some tips on the syntax for different things you're trying to do. And then if you feel like you've got quite a bit you want to do on a report, just give us a call and we can get you a quote for us customizing the report to what you want to see. That's always something that we have available as well. All right, so let's go back and take a look at the last couple things here. So the last thing I want to take a look at here is actually using your new report. So when you go to use your new report, we want to make sure that we have it set up in your reports list. So let's jump back over to this. Let's say we have this all completed. I'm going to save it. Go ahead and close my report editor and back into SigmaNEST here. So we were in the report section here in print. All right, and there's our list of reports. Now, when we first cloned that report, it actually did add it to the list, but it's way down here at the bottom. So I'm going to jump back into setup. I'm going to take that cloned report and I'm going to move it up so that it's easy to view with my other reports. So there's my task layout summary 1, the report that we edited. I'll go ahead and hit OK. Now, I need to close this window before it'll refresh. So I'll just close and click print again. Now I see task layout summary 1. There's the one I want to use. So I'm going to check that on and go ahead and preview it, and that'll be the report that we edited. So the big thing there is just to make sure that, keep in mind that anything new that you add or anything you clone is going to wind up at the bottom of that list, and you may want to move it up in the list and make sure that it's turned on and not the original report. And there it is. There's our new task layout summary with the sheet area, the highlighted number of layouts. Everything good to go there. All right. So once you have that all set up, you should be good to go for your report.